projects like these, basically? How do you sprint projects like these that you don't even know how long it will take? You're not really sure. You never done it before. And can you really say it's going to take 1 week? I mean, it's hard to say, you know.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our series where we talk about building a product and share our experience with you. Today, we are going to talk about working in sprints and why we believe that working in sprints is the most productive way of building a product. And in our past 7 years, we tried many different ways of organizing our work, and we learned a lot. And we used sprints before. We got back to them again. This time, we improved how we work in sprints a lot, and we are going to share it with you today. And we are going to share with you how you can work in sprints so you are more productive.
Yeah, maybe like before we begin, we should share like what's our situation currently, like what we are working on,
It's fucked up.
because I think it's very important when you work in sprints. It's very important to somehow mm, pick the best setup for the type of work you are doing.
Yeah, it's about the context always.
Yeah. So what we are working on right now?
So right now we are working on Crazy Monkeys and Welder. Crazy Monkeys, we are launching 12 products in 12 weeks, which is what actually brought us to the sprints again and helped us to shape the sprint format a lot. But we also work on Welder, which is tool we are recording on right now. It's a software as a service, and we also do client sprints, client work, and we also build other tiny products.
So basically, we do
So I believe for
everything everywhere. We are all around, and I think this is the reason why it's very, very important for us to work in a sprint.
yeah, it gives us kind of organize. It gives us the order in all of the chaos, which is super important to have the combination of these two. Um, and so maybe let's get into how we worked in the past, and what we tried and why it worked or didn't work for us. And in the past we did almost the same. We had projects and products, but mostly we focused on one thing at a time. For example, we started doing contracts at early beginning, and we worked just
This
like
was
we
like
worked.
7 years
There
ago.
was
We
no
were just freshly out of high school, and we work for clients, making websites and everything. Yeah, I think back at the time we just did something, without really much
yeah.
thinking about it.
And then we got more into how to organize the work. We start working on made by source Photoshop plugins, and that's where we were like, okay, we should be more effective, and we hired one more guy to our team. So we wanted to give it some structure, and we of course wanted to try sprints, and we did it. But I'm actually like curious, and we are talking about this for the first time after a long time. But why do you think, guys, that we always failed sticking to these sprints? And just to give you the outline, the sprints were 1 week sprints. At Monday, we always had a kickoff where we set up the week. We had a Trello to keep all the tasks, and each day we had a sync at 10 in the morning, and we went through what we did like the day before and what we are going to do this day. And we also tried to have a retrospective on Friday or on Sunday to just go through the recap of the week, what we did and what we did not make
Yeah,
happen.
I think
Yeah, maybe I can offer at least my opinion on that. I think, at least from my point of view, basically, now that I'm thinking about it again, I think it's not in the past we didn't stick with the sprints because I think it's not that sprints only have advantages and no disadvantages. And I think at a time we thought that it's basically useless and more process, and more process is not usually good if you can avoid it. So I think what actually changed and why we are now excited about sprints is that we extended it with actually the goals that each sprint should have, and then was the result of that sprint, which we didn't have before. Before, if you remember, what we actually did is that we every time we did like 2 weeks or 1 week of sprints, And then after that we just created the next sprint, a next sprint, a next sprint, and there was never any retrospective about why we didn't accomplish these goals, or how
Hmm.
did we leverage this sprint, basically. And I think this is why, for example, we tried the sprints for 3 to 4 weeks, but after that it was just a useless process because we were doing the same things anyway. And I think what changed
Yeah,
now
exactly.
is that we have so many things, and but now we can actually take a look at the sprint and see if we actually accomplished the result, which is obviously we could do that 4 years ago, but we just didn't. And I think this is why
Yeah,
we actually.
we didn't have that many things to do at once, and we
Yeah,
didn't need to do so much prioritization. Um, and also we didn't set clear goals that should be achieved. So for example, if I just take it overall, we were working on the made by source, which was one plugin at a time. We worked on it like for 2 3 months, and we just worked on it, and it was always clear like what we should do in the next week. And right now we have so many things at once, that we really have to assess those things and say, okay, this one can bring the most what we need, this is how we can measure it, and this is how we want to leverage it. Let's do the sprint, and then we can clearly see if it works for us. But I have one question: why we didn't have that much work back in the
Yeah,
time? Like,
maybe just to go back, like, to Made by Source and the situation back then. I think the fundamental reason why we didn't stick to working in sprints was that we didn't have so much experience to really find the setup which will be, like, natural for us, something we can stick to. Because back then, I think like we mostly came with the new ideas in a way that we read something somewhere and we tried to apply it to our conditions. But I think right now, like, for example, when we came up with the current framework for sprints, like, we didn't read it anywhere. We just, like, organically came up with something like which really suits for us.
yeah. It also, I would also add to that it also suits us in the current time frame for what we are doing right now, which is basically a lot of different stuff. I can also imagine a scenario where sometimes in the future we will focus just on one thing, and maybe a lot of ceremony for sprints will not be needed. We will be maybe still doing sprints, but on a lot longer scale, or with a lower like process where we basically don't have to define so many goals and stuff like that. We may still do it because we will figure out it's still useful. But I think if you are really doing something that is uncertain or long running, I think sprints really do make a little bit less sense, at least at the start of the project.
I think they make sense in general. Like, it just it
yeah,
just
me too.
depends on the way you implement it. And I think this should be like
Yeah.
one of the most important like thoughts I had on this topic, is that you shouldn't.
Mm.
This is so much specific to every person and every team, that you shouldn't take a framework from somewhere else and just try to apply it on yourself. I think you should come up with something really for you, like custom system.
Yeah, so let's maybe, because I completely agree, and I believe we also can give some inspiration what are our prerequisites and what we find out why this makes sense for us and why it works for us right now, and we can compare it with before when it did not work for us. So what are again, like maybe in more concise way, because we touched it already, but what are the prerequisites that we find sprints useful? Like, it's that we have a lot of work, like a lot of things we can do. So it's the need for prioritization. It's it's the need for results. So like we are really setting each week goals that we want to achieve, which is super clear, but we already did that before. But I feel it was not so specific, like, uh, right now it's more like specific, and it's also connected to that we know better our goals than before. Like, we are much more able to crystallize and specify our goals, and why they are important, and we are able to specify the sub goals better than before, because before it was like, okay, we need to make this work, and that was like the sprint, make it work. And but right now it's really like, okay, we need to make this work, and that has this goal, and these sub goals has these sub goals. um Anything else you think is like the what makes it really work for us right
Yeah,
now.
maybe the question is, does it work?
I
Yeah,
was
I
Because
not
think
there.
this is actually
like my like my point of view is that it works. It's much better than before, but there are still like many pitfalls. Like for example, mm, I don't remember like we have ever finished a sprint. Like really, because in my opinion it's very important when you work in sprints to really finish, start a new one, and don't do anything like for the past sprint. And I think right now we are in a situation where we always plan more work than we are able to do. And like every Monday we are just finishing something from the previous sprint. And like mm, in the case of the client sprint we work on, like for Anticafe, we are even not finished after 1 month or something.
Yeah, but that's the process of finding out how to work with
Yeah,
sprints,
we are still in the
I
process.
think.
Like I think like in half year or 1 year we are
But
going to
what I
much
wanted to share with
better.
yeah, what I wanted to share first is like what's the basic of making sprints meaningful for you. Maybe that's it. And right now, yeah, it's about like how to make it work for you, and if it works for us.
Yeah, like in my opinion, it's the best system for I would say like 90% of people. Like generally, uh, not in a specific
But
way,
why?
but if you bend it so it suits you, I think it's the best system because like it helps you organize your work and to really focus on something which is important. It's like, for example,
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage is that if you are using sprint system, you can basically change priorities every week, which is important if you are a young company or you want to, you have just three people and you need to be very agile, which is something that is harder to do if you have like 1 to 2 months basically sprints. It's still a sprint, but it's not really a sprint. It's 2 months of roadmap. This is really harder to change. It's usually much more set in
yeah,
stone. And I would say that this is something that we use basically every week. Every week we set completely new priorities, and you can like maybe you can talk. Maybe in the next video we can discuss if it's a good thing that we are actually completely changing priorities like every week and stuff like that. But otherwise, I think it's very beneficial if you are still in discovery phase. And this is what we use sprints for most, basically. I think right now.
yeah, I would like to compare it to like sports. So, for example, if you are trying to run a marathon and you don't set yourself like weekly goals, like this week I will ride 5K, 5K, and 20K, for example, you can still achieve the goal. You can still run the marathon and train efficiently for that. But it's going to be, in my opinion, much harder for you if you don't have like a specific plan for every day.
It's a framework. It's a system to push you to tear things, big projects down into smaller pieces with clear goals and clear tasks for everyone in the team, so you can easily see what should be done, if it was done, if so, like what are the results of it, if it's impactful, and also prioritize the little goals, the little teardowns tasks to the big one
Yeah,
that you
and I
want to
think there's
achieve.
another aspect,
Um,
and that's like when your team is distributed, you are not in the same office. Like I think this is super super important, and maybe this is the reason why we are now in such a need for this kind of framework because like in the past we
mm,
always sit next to each other every day, every single
it's
day.
also
I could just turn around and talk with you about anything for hours. Now we don't have that luxury, so we have to be like more structured.
okay. So and yeah, do you want to chat about what we struggle with right now?
Yeah, I think the most important thing we struggle with is finishing the sprints. You know,
Yeah, so it's about okay. So what we struggle right now is setting up the expectations and the goals, and then finishing them and hitting them. So we always mostly overestimate what we can do, and we don't deliver, and then the sprint goes like on to next week, and we need to learn to make it like smaller and
yeah,
fewer
like no
tasks
matter how
into the week.
pessimistic you are always too optimistic when
Yeah,
planning.
a little bit optimistic.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah, that's the challenge. I believe that's the challenge for like it was always the challenge, and it's still the challenge back in the time we had this too. Even more, it was like 1 week was 1 month at
Yeah,
back
we
at
are
the
getting
time.
better
I
and
remember
better,
that.
like every year. Maybe
Yeah.
in another 7 years we will have good
Mm.
estimate.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear like what's others if someone is still listening. I'm really curious to hear your opinion in the comments or wherever. If you tried sprints, and if so, like what's the biggest challenge for you, and also how do you improve your estimation ability for these sprints? You know, like that's a big topic.
Yeah, and also I would like to add to that. I think it's fine for quite a while to be wrong when you are doing something new. So, for example, when we started Anti-Cafe Sprint, it was maybe in hindsight it was obvious that it's going to be wrong because this is the first time we tried to actually do 1 week sprint for a client. You know, so you just adjust basically and try to do it better next time. But the but I think every time you try something new, for example, like content, shorter client sprints or some other R&D project that you still don't know how long it will take. I think it may be hard to actually hit the sprint deadline, you know. And I think the biggest challenge is with the sprints is projects like these basically. How do you sprint projects like these that you don't even know how long it will take? You're not really sure. You never done it before, and can you really say it's going to take 1 week? I mean, it's hard to say, you know. So this is something that I thought was like to discuss in the future basically, you know, if how do we split like these new kinds of projects into this R framework we have, which is sprints right
Mm.
now.
Yeah, it's like there should be a sprint for estimating the other sprints, kind of. And we talked about it yesterday
Yeah,
a bit.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
it's true. Yeah, because you are always like in the business, you are always fighting against the unknown, against the market that is unknown, or whatever the world that is unknown. And I like how when I'm not sure if I can say it properly, but in the book of The Art of War by Shao Tzu, or what's his name, he always calls that like if you want to win, you have to know your opponent and you have to know yourself. And if you don't know yourself and you don't know your opponent, you are always going to lose. And if you know yourself and you don't know your opponent, it's like maybe. And like with the business, I feel like you almost never know your opponent, and you are trying to do everything you can to know your opponent. It might be setting a proper target out there and so that you can understand and you know them better. It might be understanding the scope and the complexity of the project so you can tear it down in the sprints. And you are always fighting for this. I need to know my opponent. I need to know what's the challenge as much as possible so I can do everything to prepare myself for it and to set the real goals. Just a bit philosophical insertion. um, all right, so let's try to concise it into a takeaway. Work in sprints. When
When
and
I think
why?
like in general you should consider working in sprints. Most probably it's the best setup for you as well as for 90% of other people.
Yeah, if you feel like there's a lot on your back, um, you need to prioritize. You feel like you are not sure that you hit the goals you wanted to hit, or you are not even sure what's your goals. Like try to work in sprints. It might clear this up for you, um, and help you with the chaos and putting it more into the
Yeah,
order.
and try to come up
Um,
with your own system, because like it's so specific that taking a system like in a whole from someone else doesn't have to work for you.
yeah, it's like 1 week sprint or 2 week
Yeah,
sprint.
maybe
I
you
I
can
know
even
that
work in
Basecamp
like
do like
monthly
4 week
sprints
sprint.
if it suits you. Like it really
Yeah.
depends. Make it your own.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with this video. If you liked it, leave us a like. Uh, but most importantly, comment if you have anything to add to this discussion. If you think we are right, if you think we are wrong, because there are many ways on doing this. We will be happy to learn, and we are always open to hear from you, and you to join us on these discussions, because we are recording them through Welder, so you can easily join our discussion on any given topic that you have in mind, or we can tell you the topic and you can join it. We also have our Discord, which is a community of product builders, we are moving into circle service, but it's a community of people like us, and you can join it if you want. And that's it. And yeah, subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.